What's going on, everybody? Another installment from hotel room this time of shooting it straight with myself, Justin Jackson, and my man John. Here to kind of break down what's been going on recently with UNC and this basketball team. Obviously, I'm on the road, so the background might look a little bit different. I gotta still try to provide for the family a little bit more when it comes to basketball. So currently on a road trip, but obviously got a chance to watch some of the watch some of the game last night and then watch the game over again this morning. And a loss, but I'm not necessarily too beat up about it. Obviously, North Carolina lost to UConn 87-76. Um, but I think I've got some takeaways that I think some people would take a little bit differently coming off of a loss. And I think a few of them, we can just hop right into it and talk about it. But I think when you watch this game, we talk about it all the time. RJ and Mondo are going to get the most attention, and those guys, they've been there, they've proven themselves um, to need attention. But when you go against a team like UConn, who, in my opinion, is obviously they won it last year, and the way they look after watching the game, they look like they could possibly repeat. And so when you go against a team like UConn, you have to have other guys step up, and you have to have guys that are able to produce in these type of environments and these type of games. And when I watched the game, speaking of Mondo, he finished with 13 and 13, and that seems like it would be, good enough. But when I look at kind of everything that Mondo, his abilities and everything that his accolades and things like that. Obviously, they had, another 7-footer on the other side to go against him, but there's no way that he should not be able to still dominate. And so when I watched that game, 4 for 12 from the field, 5 for 10 from the free throw line, which is something we talked about that he's really improved in. Um, And so when I see, when I watch this game, could Mondo have done a little bit more? I think he could have been a little bit more aggressive. I think he could have finished some of those around the rim a little bit more. I think he could have made his free throws a little bit more consistently last night. But I think for me, my biggest, you know, if you want to call it an encouragement or a, call, is we got to get more from Cormac. Somebody who we talked about, going into this season of, he's been in college basketball for a long time at this point, and has proven himself to be a pretty solid college basketball player. In these type of games, it's tough to see him go 3 for 10 from the field and 0 for 6 from three. It's obviously basketball. You make some, you miss some, is how it goes. But in these type of games, as a player, these are the ones that you have to try your best to, you know, really go out there and produce and do the best that you possibly can. And so I think that's kind of the biggest thing that I kind of took away from it. And one of the biggest things too is, it's not necessarily just Cormac, shooting the ball, that I really look at and say, okay, well, you know, he couldn't hit shots today, so he couldn't do anything for the team. There's been a ton of games where, for example, the national championship game that I played in, I was 0 for 9 from three. It felt like I couldn't, if you had opened up the ocean, I couldn't have thrown it in there and made anything. But there's other ways that you can affect the game. When you look at Cormac's stat line, it's 6 points, 0 rebounds, 0 assists, 0 steals, 0 blocks, 1 turnover, and 2 fouls. And so, you know, are there other ways that you can, you know, help the team when you're not hitting shots? 100%. And I think we didn't really see that from Cormac. So when you take away from the game, you're like, man, Cormac didn't hit shots. Well, Cormac might not hit shots the next 3 games, but there's other ways to be able to affect the game. And I think the perfect example for that for me is Harrison. When you watch Harrison Ingram play on the court, obviously he had 20 last night, hit a couple threes, had some took guys to the post and had some buckets down low, but his effect on the game is so much more than just that. You see him defensively. You see him. That both teams got a little rowdy. I think it. UConn, I think, kind of feeds off their coach. But you saw them kind of chipping a little bit, and Harrison was right there in the middle of it. And you see him defensively; he's causing some issues. He's rebounding the ball, playmaking, causing, making plays for other people. So I think that's, I mean, just on his own team, I think that's the perfect example of how Harrison is able to affect the game in other ways outside of scoring. And I know Cormac can do that. So I think going from this game, I think that's kind of the one. I don't even want to call it a negative. I think it's the one learning experience is, okay, we've got a few of our main guys, but Cormac is kind of that fourth guy. I think that really has to affect the game in certain ways. I think the big, obviously, number one is being able to shoot and stretch the floor to cause more space for the guys to drive and Mondo down low. But just being able to do something outside of shooting, I think Cormac is totally you know has that ability. So, um, I think that's my biggest takeaway. On kind of that side of things. So, as we watched, I think that's something they can continue to do. What did you think that you kind of saw as you went on?
Yeah, I dug into the data a little bit on Cormac. Before I do that, I want to mention you're listening to Shooting It Straight with Justin Jackson. Inside Carolina's weekly basketball podcast we release every week on Thursday. So we appreciate you listening. Want to give a shout out as well to our sponsors, Johnny T-shirt and Congruity HR, where Tar Heel fans can get a free payroll and HR needs assessment. Yeah, I was looking at Cormac. He has a lot of experience playing college basketball. His career numbers 223 for 649, or a career 34% three-point shooter. So he has the ability. This season, though, he's shooting 25.5%. And more specifically, he's really struggling on above the break threes. He's 5 of 33 per CBB analytics on those above the break threes. That's 15%. So I think that's sort of the core of some of his issues. So Justin, take us through this a little bit as a shooter. I'm to be clear, I'm not saying this has ever happened to you on the court, but if you were to go through a shooting slump, or maybe you have once and twice in your career, what's that like as a shooter, and how do you kind of find your shot, especially when you're playing such tough competition throughout the year?
Well, I want to be the first to say that I've probably had more bad shooting nights than I've had good shooting nights. So that's just the way basketball works sometimes. But I mean, it's tough in the moment because as a shooter, that's kind of what you lay your identity on. That this is what I do. I knock down open shots. I make shots when it comes to me. Um, but like I talk about, there's other ways to affect the game. Whether that's rebounding, whether that's okay, I can't make a shot, so I'm gonna drive it and try to make a play for somebody else. Maybe that's just defensively. Maybe defensively, you make sure that your guy has the worst night possible. Um, like I said, in that championship game when I was 0 for 9, I was guarding, one of the other best players on the other team. And so because I wasn't shooting very well, my whole goal was, okay, well, on the other end, I'm going to make sure that, you know, my matchup is not going to win this matchup. And, um, I think it's also very tough, if you've never really been in that kind of role as a scorer or shooter. A lot of times you can start to kind of press a little bit. I think that's kind of what I've seen a few times with Cormac and his shots. Um, you kind of see him rush a little bit at this point. He gets the ball a lot of times, and it's maybe he has a little bit of a quicker trigger, but you can kind of see him kind of rush his shots a little bit more. And maybe that's just coming from, okay, I really want to get this shot off. I really want to make this, and it's just kind of adding more pressure to himself. As a shooter, you just have to try your best just to move on to the next one and shoot it exactly how you shoot it whenever you're working out on your own. In the games, whenever you really have it going, you just have to try to keep the same mechanics, keep the same mindset, keep the same confidence, and step into the next one exactly how you've done before. And so, hopefully he can kind of do that. A lot of times for me, it was a matter of just, okay, you know what, I'm just going to go get some extra reps up either after practice or on my own, just kind of try to find that rhythm a little bit more. Because it's not like they're not going to go back to Cormac. He shot six threes. Shot 10 times total. So, and this team needs him. And at the end of the day, it's not even like Cormac is playing terrible. It's just a matter of if he gets two of those threes to fall, I think it changes the whole dynamic of kind of what you saw offensively for their team last night. And so, you know, I think a lot of times it's just a matter of just kind of you know going right back into the basics, kind of getting that confidence level back up, and making sure you stay at that level. Um, so I think he'll be totally fine. But I also, man, I want to talk about Harrison Ingram and what he means for this team. I'm going to continue to double down. I'm starting to kind of get on the edge of it, but I'm gonna double down and say that RJ and Mondo are still the two top dogs when it comes to this team. But when I watch Harrison, man, he is the X factor, and he's the X factor that makes Mondo and RJ the two top dogs, if that makes sense. And what I mean by that is a lot of times when you see Harrison Ingram on the court, the things that RJ, he's been hitting some tough, pull up threes and isolation threes and things like that. So a lot of the stuff that he gets is kind of on his own too. But when you see kind of the opening and the space that maybe him and Mondo get at times, I think a lot of times it's created by Harrison Ingram. When you see him a lot of times if Harrison doesn't have the drive right away, you see him almost every time he goes to the back down. And a lot of times he's able to turn and score, but we've also seen multiple times him be able to make a play out of the post, whether they're sending a double at him or he just finds an open guy. You'll also see him, like we talked about, a few episodes ago, you'll see him playing in the dunker a little bit to space things out. And so it just gives more space for guys to make plays, to drive, for Mondo to get it on the block and do some things. You see him also being able to stretch the floor. I think for me, that's kind of the surprise, I guess I would say. I would have expected Cormac to kind of be on, the 3-point shooting percentage that Harrison is on and kind of flip flop things. But I mean, he's shooting the lights out when it comes to, from the 3-point line. And so, just having everything that he does, and that's all offensively. Defensively, you can put him on their best player at all times. You can switch him around. You can put him on the point guard. You can put him on the 4, sometimes switch onto the 5, and he just causes so much havoc. And I think one thing that he gives this team a little bit of grit, and you need at least one player that's really, you know, down for anything that is coming. And I think you see that from Harrison. You see him, when the other team is chirping, he's the main one right there in the middle, ready to go. And I think so. So when I talk about that, I think that's it. That's why I say I'm kind of on the edge. I think RJ is obviously he's had some unbelievable games that he's racked up, here recently, and I think he's going to be consistently, that guy as far as scoring for this team. But I mean, I think Harrison Ingram is kind of the guy that makes this whole ship go. And um, if he can continue to play this consistent, and hopefully everybody else, RJ, Mondo, Cormac gets it going, and Elliott as he kind of matures and grows on the college level, I think this team is just going to continue to get better. And so, you know, we'll see how things go. We talk about there's a couple more couple more big time games coming up, and this is one of the games. I think like we talked about, UConn is very very capable. I think they're a very capable team of repeating another national championship run, and so they're kind of the measuring stick per se, for college basketball, but also for this North Carolina team. When you look at the matchups, they've got a big, UNC has a big. They've got good point guard play. UNC has good point guard play. They've got, a couple wings and Spencer and Caravan. We've got a couple wings as well. And so, I think it's a great, matchup and a great way for UNC to kind of look and say, okay, well, you know what? They got us this time. Maybe we're not there yet, but we're very capable of getting there. And as the season goes on, just continue to kind of keep that mindset and continue to grow. and mature. And I think me personally, I think this team will be totally fine as the season goes on.
I like what you said about consistency there, both with Harrison and RJ. Two stats for that. Number one, Harrison, he is shooting the lights out. He's 19 of 41. That's 46% on three pointers, which is crazy. I mean, he was a good 3-point shooter coming into Chapel Hill and coming into North Carolina, but he's kind of elevated his play to another level. And then also RJ Davis with his consistency. I've been really impressed with him. I pulled this stat because I think, Justin, you'll like this one. RJ is the first Tar Heel to lead the team in scoring in 5 straight games since yourself, who did it straight games in the 2016-2017 season. So I think that speaks to RJ just showing up every single night and just putting the ball in the hoop lots of different ways, threes, twos, getting to the rim. But he's just really been impressive so far this season.
Yeah, I mean, and I think we kind of always knew that, and I think that's why once again Harrison and I'll throw Elliott in there as well are so important for this team because it allows him to just be who he is, and that's just to go score the basketball. He doesn't
Mhm.
necessarily have to worry about, okay, we got to set up the offense, I got to make sure guys are in the right place, I got to make sure certain guys are getting touches and all that kind of stuff. For him, it's come down. If I get the ball and I'm in a scoring position, I can go try to score. And I think that's just his strength. And obviously, to his credit, his consistency has been, especially in the last few games, has been really, really good for this team. And I think we'll continue to kind of see that, especially like I talk about with Elliott. I think last night is one of the best tests for this UNC team was Elliott going against, guys on the other side that were as experienced and as mature um, in that spot as they are. For him to be able to go up against that and kind of see, okay, this is the parameter of where I have to be. This is what I have to compete against if we're going to try to win a national championship. This is the pace and the maturity level that I have to have, each and every game. So I think that's, obviously he didn't have a huge stat line, but kind of, as he goes through that game and as he goes through the season going against some of these other tough opponents, I think that's going to really be big for them. And so it just makes RJ's life way easier. So, I think as that game went on, and I thought it was a good game. I think UConn made a couple runs there that towards the end of the game that just kind of, you know, took it a little bit too far that UNC couldn't handle. Because a lot of times when we watch this season, UNC has kind of gotten back into the game from their pressure defense and their ability to speed other teams up, maybe make them take tough shots or cause turnovers and things like that. We definitely saw it against Florida State. Um, but against a team like this, they've got guys who have been in the national championship game, who have seen every situation. They're obviously very well coached. They've been over all the possibilities that a game could go into, and so I think a lot of times whenever you get into these games and you get down, it's going to be tough to come back because you saw kind of how they put a press on for a few possessions and UConn made two or three passes and they were at the rim on the other end, either getting fouled or scoring. So I think defensively, that's kind of what made it tough for them was playing from behind against a team like this that executes offensively, gets the shot that they want every single possession, plays together, plays unselfishly, and has at every spot has somebody that is very capable of scoring or making a play for somebody else. It's just tough to play from behind against a team like this. But I mean, I really, I don't really know if I had too much negative takeaways from this game. I think at times, maybe shot selection, whenever, you kind of when other teams go on a run, you really want to make sure that you get the right shot at the right time. And I think at times you saw a few times that, they were making a run and we come down and maybe we shoot a shot, with a hand in their face, or we try to drive in and make a play and something wouldn't work. But, I think for me, this was a great game and a great measuring um, game to kind of see where North Carolina is going forward. And as I think that's kind of the biggest thing for this. Um, I got a question for you, man. Um, when you watch this game, what are you thinking from the bench side of things? Because I've got a few takes. I think it's I've got some takeaways from it. But when you look at the bench and what they do when they get in onto the court, or maybe just the fact that they don't get a ton of opportunities on the court, what's your thoughts on that, man?
Yeah, I have a couple of different thoughts. I think number one, coming into the season, we expected a lot of depth for this UNC team. We expected that to possibly even be one of their strengths. But I think as the season has gone along, the rotations have tightened a little bit. Obviously, it makes sense to do that against UConn, but I think UNC has to continue to find spots to develop their bench because they're going to need them throughout ACC play. They're down to 28.1% of their minutes being bench minutes, which is 259th in the country, which is sort of starting to trend lower as the season goes along. And I think specifically for a few guys, I think you have to find ways for them to make more of an impact. I think Paxton is one key example. When he's out there on the floor, trying to find ways to, find him different shots within the offense. And then Jalen Withers as well is one who I'd want to continue to see UNC try to find a way to use him because he brings something, especially on the defensive end with some athleticism that UNC it feels like they really need. But he hasn't, his minutes have gone down a little bit over the last few games. What's been your take on the bench side of things for UNC?
I think for me, when it comes to the bench, and this is coming from somebody who I was blessed enough to I never really had to until I got to the NBA. I never really had to deal with playing 9 minutes in a game, or going out there and playing 3 minutes and then getting subbed out, and I never had to deal with that until I got to the NBA. So, but from my experience in the NBA, when it comes to that situation, there has to be some sort of effect that you do on the game to get more minutes and to garner more minutes. And I think when I watch this game, we talk about how, obviously the main guys have to produce in games like this. That's just period. Almost all the weight falls on those guys. But for instance, with Cormac struggling shooting, and there not being a ton of effect on the game from him, when I see like a Jalen Withers go in the game, or a Pax go in the game, you can see right away if somebody is kind of timid, or if they're not fully into the game. You can see it right away. Especially if you've played basketball, and for me playing at a high level, you can kind of sense, okay, this guy was really ready to go, or he just, I don't know if he's got it. And when I watch the game, I mean, you know, obviously I'm one that I would love to see Jalen Washington really be somebody to, you know, with his length and his height and his ability to stretch the floor. I would love to see it. But when you see him go on the floor, there's just almost like I don't like using the word soft, and I don't want to ever call somebody soft, but I guess timid is kind of the word. When you see him get the ball, and when you see him defensively, there's no real aggression. Um, I mean, he played 5 minutes, which is not a lot at all, but he had zeros all the way across the board. You see a guy like Jalen Withers comes in, and he shoots a three that wasn't very close, and then he goes in and basically misses I'll call it a layup. I mean, it was basically a hook shot, but basically misses a layup. Um, and in games like those matter. And then, for me, Seth has been probably the most steady when it comes to a guy that comes off the bench. And then a lot of it just comes purely from the defensive end. Um, but I mean, even, when it comes to offense, I mean, it's gonna be tough to really get things going for Seth. And then I watch a guy like Pax, and I think he has some ability. but I just don't this level, it's a different level from where he came from, and it's not like, oh, he can't play at this level because I've seen Pax in practice. I've seen him in other games. Like he's more than capable. But last night there was just a few times with kind of, I'll say almost everybody on the bench, when they come in the game, there's just no real just assertiveness into the game. And like I said, I hadn't dealt with that until I got to the NBA. But even in those times when I was playing very minimal minutes in the NBA, your whole goal is to make sure that your presence is known when you get on the floor. And when I watched that game yesterday, I just don't know if any of those guys off the bench, if their presence was truly felt. And, obviously, does more time give guys the ability to get into a rhythm and to kind of get going? Yes, 100%. And so I totally, I'm not minimizing that at all. But just I never there wasn't a time in that game where it was like, man, we really need to keep this guy in, or man, we could really use this guy in right now. Um, there was never that from the bench. And so if I don't see that, and as a coach, if I don't see that and I don't feel that, then especially in a game like this, I'm going with whatever is working, whatever I think will win the game. And
Mhm.
um, that I think that's kind of where they were last night. Especially, I mean, this was a high level game. It was two very high level teams, very well coached teams, just going at it back and forth. And so a lot of times that's what ends up happening. You might have in your mind going into a game as a coach, a lot of times, you know, you might go into a game. This is how the rotation is going to go. We're going to give this guy a chance. We're going to give this guy a chance, this guy a chance. And then once that second half comes around, then you're just trying to win the game. And if the guys that are coming off the bench haven't shown that they can help you in that manner, then that's kind of why the minutes seem so low. But I agree with you from the standpoint there has to be ways that we can get all of these people involved and give them opportunity to develop and get better because I think they will be needed and they will, I think, end up being very big for us at some point this season. I think there will be a game when Pax comes in and he hits two or three big time threes. I think there's going to be a game where, Seth gets two or three big defensive stops and we end up coming down and scoring and winning a game. I think there's going to be a game where Jalen Withers is huge and his versatility really shows. And, he plays 30 minutes in a game and he's, huge for us. I think there's going to be times where that happens, but there has to be some sort of consistency and some sort of, okay, when I put this guy in the game, I know this is what he's going to do. I know he's going to affect the game defensively. I know offensively, if he gets an open shot, he's going to step into it and he's going to knock it down. I know he's going to go to the offensive glass every single time. There's just certain things that you have to be able to see from guys coming off the bench to be able to provide that. So hopefully they continue to do it. I think the game was tough to kind of go off of when it comes to bench minutes because, like I said, you're just trying to win big time games like that, and the coaches are obviously going to go with who they're most confident in, and obviously that kind of shows who they probably are the most confident in. But I think there is definitely opportunity. It's still early in the season. There's opportunity for them to for sure get the bench going and find ways to get them involved and things like that. So overall, man, I mean, I love where this team is at. Are there things that they can do better? I think in a game like that, you probably are going to have to hit more than seven threes to beat a team like this. Um, I mean, you look at the free throw shooting, they were 13 for 22. I mean, that's 9 points right there. They lost by 11. Um, you make a couple of those free throws, I think it might change the momentum of the game. Um, there's just little things. They took care of the ball. 7 turnovers is a great number in a game of that magnitude. Um, and so, I think this team is exactly where they should be. Like we talk about, this is one of the best um, times and one of the best games for them to learn from and take away from because of how good UConn is and the things they run and defensively the things they do and how they match up against a team like this. So I think this team is totally fine. I know a lot of people are, obviously you want to win games like this 100%, but when you watch it and you look back on it, they lost to a really, really good team that has the possibility of going and winning another national championship. And if this team wants to get to that point, then, you know, these are the teams they got to go through. So I think they're going to be totally fine. I think, you add the fact that they played at MSG, which is that's a for a lot of these guys, that might be a once in a lifetime type situation, being able to play in that kind of arena. Um, and so, for them to be able to still show up and compete in that game, I think I'm in a great place with this team. I think.
After the game, Hubert Davis was talking about the break that UNC gets a little bit. It's exam break coming up now, some time to get away from games, but also a chance to practice a little bit more and kind of work on themselves. That was something that Hubert hit on, the chance to not prepare for an opponent, but really practice as a team. What are some key things, Justin, you'd want to see the team work on over exam break? After we've had, the opportunity to watch them over 9 games so far this year.
I mean, I want to see. I think this is a great time for shooters to be able to get into the gym and get a rhythm again. I think that's the biggest thing. All year, that's kind of what we've talked about is how important the shooting is, and how the last couple years has been not great when it comes to that. And so I think this is a great time for guys just to be able to all they have to worry about is studying for tests and being in the gym. They don't got to worry about traveling to a game or doing this or doing that. There's really not a ton that you have to worry about. And so being able to get in the gym whenever you can and getting extra shots up, getting back into a rhythm. Obviously we talk about the free throws, getting to the free throw line, working on that still. I mean, that's going to be a huge situation. A game like this, missing 9 free throws, and shoot 59% is it's going to be tough to beat another good team shooting like that. Um, and so I think, doing those things, that's things that guys can do individually. I think as a team, I think when you watch a team like UConn, the one thing I was amazed with was their execution offensively. You obviously, Coach Hurley he runs some unbelievable sets in general, but the way that UConn executed it, you know, on a consistent basis to get the shots that they really wanted from the guys that they wanted to get the shots from, I think was the most impressive thing for me when it came to UConn offensively. And I think maybe that's one thing that North Carolina can kind of get a little bit better at is just executing certain plays, getting guys in certain situations where they can be aggressive to score, they can attack, or for instance with Cormac, making sure, executing plays in a way where he gets shots where he doesn't have to rush the shots. He doesn't have to do a quick trigger three or a, hurry up and get the shot off. He can get some swings where he's in the corner. We've seen a couple of times already, at home a couple of times where an action happens and a guy gets the ball in the wing and kicks it to Cormac in the corner and there's nobody around him and he can just take his time and knock the shot down. Getting things like that a lot of time goes to execution, whether it's a play executing or spacing being executed the right way, whatever that might be. That's, I think, something that they can focus on. Um, just, whether that's just running through dummy offense or running, whenever they play against each other, making sure that they execute whatever play it is that they're doing and get the right guys the ball at the right time, whatever that looks like. I think that's kind of something that they can do. But, like you said, this is a time that, as players, Coach Williams would always say, I've got nothing to do and you've got nothing to do. So we can be in the gym all day long if we need to. But this is a great time for them just to be able to, especially after a game like that, just kind of get back to the basics, get the confidence level back up, take the goods and the bads from this game and, watch the film, learn from it and move on from it and take the confidence going into the next game because, you know, next game is a big game. Game after that's a big game. And, hopefully they can just continue to do that. So that's kind of the best part about this time is you don't have to worry about going to class. You don't have as much college you don't have responsibilities anyways, but you have even less responsibilities, during the Christmas break. So it's a good time just kind of get back focused on your game and kind of lock it back in on that.
As you alluded to, 2 tough games coming up for North Carolina, Kentucky on December 16th, and then Oklahoma on December 20th. But also for the kids on the team, it's an exciting chance to play in some cool venues. So this next one will be in State Farm Arena down in Atlanta against Oklahoma. That will be in the Spectrum Center in Charlotte. We already talked a little bit about Madison Square Garden already and how cool that is. So I'm curious, Justin, you've played a lot of basketball, college, professionals. What's been your favorite arena to play in over all those different years?
Favorite arena? I'll say in college, it just kind of depends on what if we're talking about NBA arenas playing in. We only played in a few of them. So we played in Barclays, which I was never a huge fan of just because it's darker in there, and I like gyms that are have a little bit more light in them. And then we played in Chicago, which the way it was set up didn't have the feel at all of Chicago's arena. Um, but I think since being in the NBA, it's hard to go against a place like Staples Center. But last year playing in the Boston Garden was probably the coolest experience when it came to a home arena, just because of how great the fans are. They come out for literally every game, how loud it gets in there, the history that's in there when you look up and you see all the jerseys and the banners and the rafters and everybody that was there before. It's pretty crazy. Um, so yeah, I think those two I think are probably the coolest ones. I mean, you've got Phoenix where the fans are extremely loud. They all come out. Um, but those are probably Boston Garden was probably the coolest. TD Garden was probably the coolest place that I've played at.
Yeah, I was going to say you got to be careful. Adam Silver is going to fine you. I think it's crypto.com arena too out in
Ah,
Los Angeles. They changed it up on us
hey,
recently.
look, if I get a fine in the mail for that, then you
You
know
got to
what?
respect that.
We'll
Yeah.
figure it out.
Hey,
But
we appreciate if
yeah,
you're listening, Mr. Commissioner. Going
yeah,
along that real quick, what is it that makes an arena kind of like a good shooting arena? You said that one of them up in, I think, Barclays, you said was a little dark. Is there certain things that you're looking for as a shooter that say, like, hey, this is a friendly shooter's gym?
yeah. I like gyms that have more light. I like gyms. That's what was so cool about TD was it was so lit. And not from the standpoint of like exciting, but um, there was just so much light in there. With Barclays, the background and everything is darker, and so depth perception's a little bit different. So that's kind of me personally. Some people love Barclays. Some people love, even MSG is a little darker too. Um, so some people love kind of that background and that ambiance of, that gym. But for me, I just love a gym that has a little bit more light, maybe a lighter color wood that you're playing on, kind of that whole thing. I kind of enjoy that a little bit more.
Real quick, do you have a take on the NBA in-season tournament courts, those crazy colors?
I think, for one, I think it's at first I was kind of, I don't really know if players will like that. I still don't know if players truly do like it. But from a fan perspective, like I think it's helped the NBA a lot, because I think you know, the idea behind the NBA basketball is, guys don't really take it serious until the playoffs start, and then you start seeing some really good basketball. But you watch some of these games that have been played and it's been intense. Guys are really fighting. There's no, you don't really see a ton of guys like resting or not playing. Like all the players are playing, and I think it's definitely helped them from viewership and just the idea of the NBA regular season. I think it's really helped a lot. So, I love it. The courts themselves are wild. There are some wild colors. I can't imagine playing on those. They're definitely interesting, but at the same time, it's just bringing more awareness to what the in-season tournament is and all that kind of stuff. So I also respect it on that front. So I think it's going to be something that they for sure keep going forward. Um, and it's been cool to watch.
I'm glad we brought up professional basketball because I have one more stat to close out the night. 26, 12, and 6. That was your line last night, I believe. So I just want to give a shout out. I don't know if people realize this, but Justin is playing the entire season. So he's doing the podcast each week, but he's also just putting up monster numbers for the Texas Legends. So shout out to Justin as he goes through his season for Legends. Justin, get us out of here. Any last thoughts before we take a break and have an exciting episode next week during exam week?
Hey, look, I'm gonna always say the same thing. Thank you to anybody that's listening, that's watching, that's tuning in. Whether you tune in every week or this is your first one or maybe your last one, we appreciate you. Um, we hope that kind of the things that we talk about, obviously, maybe helps you or enlightens you or maybe just gives you a laugh or whatever it might be. We hope that it gives you whatever it is that it needs to give you. um, Obviously for all the UNC fans, I think this team is in a great spot. It's a lot of people wouldn't say that after a loss, but kind of watching as much basketball as I've watched and played, I think this team is in a great position. And still two more big time games before ACC play really starts for them to solidify themselves as one of the better teams in the country. So, I love this team, continue to support this team and love this team. I think they're going to continue to get better and better. But like I said, thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. And, we'll talk to y'all next time.